Hello everyone, welcome to GreatLakes-TCG. My name's Jeff. I am coming at you again with another video, this time going over my Bandai Cardfest Orlando deck list and why and the story behind it and how I did. So as you might know from the previous video, I actually ended up getting 91st with, Zoo Shanks or Animal Shanks. This actually took a lot of people by surprise, and it was really fun to play. This was a deck list idea that was birthed between Quan Lee and myself during random stupid testing, like sometime like a week before Christmas, and we thought this deck actually had legs for the meta that we thought we would see going into Nationals. But as you might have predicted, things did not go exactly the way we thought. So, just starting off with my overall performance. So I did do, once again, 91st and Bandai Cardfest in Orlando. I went 6-3 overall. Very happy with the performance. Last year when I went to Cardfest, I think I got like 190th. So, I jumped up 100 spots. I know this was a smaller tournament, obviously. Last year's tournament was like 2,000 players. But at the same time, this was invite only. I will say I have heard from multiple people, like not just myself, not just my teammates, not just, from multiple people that this was probably the hardest tournament to date. They said that it was very cutthroat. People were very well prepared. And the meta was actually open enough where different things, we had a really good topping, spread, between Bonnie, Lucci, Shanks, Purple Luffy, and whatnot. Now, a lot of people were asking me questions regarding matchup spread, but also why. Why did I pick Shanks and not Purple Luffy? And I'll get into that in a second. Just to go over my matchups. So I went up against, as you could see, multiple Dofi. I think there's 5 Dofi in total. So essentially I had, Doflamingo first thing in the morning. Of course, got that dub. I went first, lost that dice roll. Round 2 against Enel, and if you don't know the Enel versus Shanks matchup, it's actually fairly Enel favored. The only thing Enel has to do is actually know how to play. And if you do and you properly starve Shanks, it's kind of hard. And especially with our deck list being a little bit more aggressive, it's kind of not much better in terms of establishing a board. Then we went up against Shanks, the mirror match. I went first, which was a bummer, but I ended up getting the win regardless. I was able to aggro them down. That's one thing our deck list actually does well. And you'll see the deck list in a little bit. Then I went up against Dofi in round 4, got that win, even though I went second. BY Luffy going second is actually very favored for Shanks. This is not, you don't play the matchup much differently than the standard BY versus like control Shanks matchup, for instance. So I felt happy there. One dice roll was able to go second. Then I played against a Bonnie. Now, typically, Bonnie is a very favored matchup for both control Shanks and Zoo Shanks. But unfortunately, this Bonnie saw the absolute god roll, and he would even admit to me, like he did not sugarcoat things. When he won, he saw 3 Doflamingo, 3 10-cost Dofis back to back, and then 2 9-cost Shanks back to back, and then 2 8-cost kids back to back. So, well, actually, that wasn't back to back. Sorry. So just to actually go over that game, it was basically on his, so I went second, he went first. On his 9-Dawn turn, he plays 8-cost kid. On my 10-Dawn turn, I play Rayleigh, I'm able to clear the kid with whatever my board's established with. On his 10-Dawn turn afterwards, he plays a 9-cost Shanks, clearing something on my board. And then I think it was Beckman. I think he cleared a Beckman that I played on 8. And then I played a Shanks, a 10-cost Shanks, but I left it standing. And then he plays a 10-cost Dofi, even though it doesn't hit my Shanks. It hit my leader, it hit my blocker Chopper, and it hit my Rayleigh. And then he plays then I use my Shanks to kill his Dofi, or no, sorry, I use my Shanks to kill his Shanks because his Dofi's standing. But that takes up a majority of my turn. I'm not able to really establish a body there. Then he plays a second Dofi. Then I play a dragon, swing out. He plays a third Dofi. And my dragon, by the way, cleared his Dofi. So I put 3 Dawn onto the dragon, plus another 2 Dawn onto the dragon. So I swung into his Dofi, which was only a 9k, so he just gave it to me. So then he only has, I cleared his board essentially. Then he plays a third Dofi, locking out now my Chopper, my Leader, and my Shanks 10 cost, my Dragon 10 cost, and my Rayleigh. And then he clears my Rayleigh by swinging into it, and then he puts down a Shanks, which clears my Shanks. So that's fine, because then my bodies are able to stand that turn. I swing out, he goes down to 0 life, and then he puts down another 9 cost Shanks, clearing my dragon. I no longer have a board. And then he puts down an 8 cost kid on the one. So I swing, I no longer have a board. I try to swing out with Leader, because I only have Leader and one other like 5 cost Chopper at this point. He rests the 5 cost Chopper with Leader ability because he played a 9 cost Shanks. And he, of course, he's able, because he hasn't been doing anything but playing big body, big body, big body, big body, big body. So, of course, now he has a plethora of counter in hand because he went down to 0 life and is able to counter out of my swing. Puts down an 8 cost kid, puts down another blocker, and by then I have no board. I have completely locked out. Couldn't win. Sorry for that tangent. Moving forward. Then played against another Dofi, went second, and I won. Another Dofi. This time I lost. This Dofi was actually really strong. He did exactly what I don't want Dofi to do, and something that our deck list is actually weak to, and I'll show you in a second. Essentially what they did is he completely ignored me, ignored my board, and just went super fast, went first, put down Jinbei into Jinbei, or Teach into Jinbei, into Jinbei, into Jinbei, and just aggroed down my face. I had no way of, I just had no counter, no cards in hand, nothing. I couldn't even get out of this. And then finally went against the Katakuri. I was actually very surprised to see Katakuri at the very end. Yes, I was X3 by then, but still. And I ended up getting that win. So, why? Why did we do... Oops, my face is in the way. So, why? Why are we playing Zoo Shanks? Why am I not playing Purple Luffy? The one deck I've just went 7-0 with in a 3v3. The one deck I've been, teching for and teaching and learning throughout all of 09. The reason is it was a meta call. So what I'm saying by meta call is, let me teach you, or let me take you back a little bit to the OP09 meta. So this was kind of, so one shout out to Jonas and Jackson. They both are obviously meta leaders and leaders in our community. But essentially speaking, I want to bring up their tier list, because their tier list was kind of like the de facto tier list that most people were talking about when they're kind of talking about nationals. And S tier, what are the 3 main decks they have? They have Doflamingo, Blackbeard, Purple Luffy, Shanks, BY Lucci. In that order. Those are 5 leaders, 5 decks in order of what we believed we would be seeing in terms of representation in nationals. Now, I know this was a little bit old. I know Blackbeard fell off a little bit, but we still expected at the highest level competition to, for these decks to be the most represented. And so we made an idea, and our idea essentially was, let me bring this up, playing a Shanks deck that is aggressive, and when it's aggressive, it's able to actually fix a lot of the matchups it might not do well in, or is just barely because Shanks is like a very 50-50 deck when you talk about control Shanks, but we tried fixing that. So we came up with the idea of Zoo Shanks, and so it was actually Quan and I testing. I was playing Purple Luffy and he was playing control Shanks, and I was actually destroying him, whether I went first, whether I went second. Purple Luffy, I saw my curve, I saw my Luffy Taros, I was going wide, I was going tall, and I was rushing his face down, and he just really had a hard time defending against Purple Luffy. So he said, you know what? I'm going to play you with, so we started messing around. So he switched to a Zoo Marco deck that he was running in 8.5. And we found out that Zoo Marco was actually really, really tough for Purple Luffy to keep up with. He went wide very fast, and he was able to answer my board by by minusing costs and swinging into them with a very wide board. And the matches we were having were a lot closer. And then that sparked the idea. Marco is just like a weaker Shanks, honestly. I know it's not exactly like that, but overall, he just feels like a weaker Shanks because he's a 4-life leader. Shanks is a 5-life leader. And you play a majority of red cards. Although, the blue cards you play in Marco are just a little bit of disruption, but you mostly just play red cards in Marco, especially when it comes to the cost reduction and the KO. And so Quan had the idea of just, hey, let's just mess around and make a Zoo Shanks deck. And this was supposed to be a meme, honestly. So he combined the initial rough draft of Zoo Shanks, and lo and behold, it was still very, very hard for my Purple Luffy deck to keep up with him. He would aggressively go wide on board, and because Purple Luffy only swings 5 while establishing a board on curve, I'm not able to pressure Shanks as well. And by the time I am able to pressure him down, he already has 4 or 5 characters on board when a traditional control Shanks might only have 1. So it was actually a very interesting scenario where we were like, hey, this deck kind of has legs. Purple Luffy's favored in Shanks, but Zoo Shanks was able to keep up, if not actually be favored into Purple Luffy. And that's what we found. So then we're like, okay, sure, it does. So this kind of fixes the Purple Luffy matchup. We think Purple Luffy is probably going to be the 3rd represented deck at Nationals. What about the first 2? We played it against Blackbeard, which at first we thought might be, S tier deck. It's going to be at Nationals. And this thing obliterated Blackbeard. It was actually a like 70-30, maybe even 80-20 matchup spread. The reason is they do not expect to see our Zoos, our choppers come out on turn 3, turn 2, turn 3, right? So we're able to go wide super fast, flood the board, and just swing their face. They have no idea what's going on. They absolutely get obliterated. It's actually such a Shanks favored matchup when you do it like this, because then you just evolve into Dragon on 8, and then you get your Shanks, your 10 drops on 10, and it just kind of was lights out. Blackbeard really had unless they knew your game plan from the beginning and were able to adapt to it. So maybe in a top cut scenario, it might not be as favored, but we weren't playing for top cut. We were just trying to get to day 2, and we'd figure out those matchups at that point then. So we were like, okay, we cleared 2 of the top 3 decks. What about the number 1 deck in the meta? And that was Blue Doflamingo. Granted, in our inner testing circle, we don't have a pro or master Dofi, so we would put together 2 or 3 people on the deck. And honestly, this is kind of the weakest argument was, hey, we felt that Doflamingos, that if we can get to, so how to say this, if we thought, hey, if we can get to 10 being fairly healthy, a 10 as a 10 Don being fairly healthy against Doflamingo, and then put down our 10 drops, because a lot of Doflamingo were not playing Red Rock. We're like, hey, at that point in the game, we are actually more favored. So it's kind of like Purple Luffy, where the longer the game goes on, the more favored Shanks can get against Dofi. And so we were like, okay, how do our animal package live up to Doflamingo? And we found out that Doflamingos who were surprised by the package and didn't know how to play into us. And I'm not going to reveal the exact secrets, but just to kind of put it a little bit out there, if they ignored our board and hit Jinbei and just swung into our face, typically we can't keep up. But we were like, hey, what are the odds Doflamingos know that right off the bat and make that adaptation right off the bat? And obviously they have to hit the Jinbeis to really hit us that hard. So we thought, okay, we're actually kind of favored into Dofi until they know how to play against us. So the more we played, the worse it got. So this was actually the deck list going, oh my God, I completely forgot. So this was actually the deck list going into Nats. It was, and I'll have the deck list in the description. Sorry guys, my camera was in the mode, but I'll go back. Essentially, this was the deck list going into Nationals. It was a animal focused deck list that beat Purple Luffy, that beat Blackbeard, and beat Doflamingo at least 50-50. At least 50-50. And so we're like, hey, this is just a better Shanks. It fixes the Purple Luffy matchup. It fixes the Blackbeard matchup for not being 50-50. It still is 50-50 into normal Shanks, which is probably going to be the 3rd or 4th most represented deck in the meta. it's 50-50 into BY and so because that doesn't really change much either. And so we're like, hey, we are onto something here. We have a deck that kind of solves and breaks the meta of what we thought we were going to see. Now, obviously, yes, I went 6-3, but this was not the deck list we ended up with. A couple of people on the team were in LCQ, and because we found out that the more you play against this deck, the more you learn how to beat it. And so we thought this deck needs to stay a secret until Nationals or LCQ, where people don't have a lot of free time or the know-abouts or know-hows to beat it, because if the surprise factor actually is a large part of why we did so well with the deck in our inner circle testing. So we had limited testing in that sense, in terms of the wide variety of people that we would like to test against. But we found, so when LCQ comes around, and we had two people that were in it using this deck list, and they went 3-2, and then they dropped. And at that point, this is the day before Nationals, and we were freaking out. We were just like, hey, we thought this deck was going to obliterate people. What happened? And we found out that good Doflamingos were easily taking advantage of our strategy against them. We just had, in this version of the deck, too many bricks, not enough 2Ks, not enough counter, and of course, not enough consistency. Our consistency was actually, while in testing the consistency was a little bit of an issue, it was never to the point where the deck was completely destroyed. But then we found out in person, either our people hit low variance or whatnot, they were having a lot of consistency issues with not seeing enough counter against specific decks. So then at that point, we did last minute testing and last minute changes. And I remember changing my deck on my airplane flight, because I had to fly out. I had work. I was in the hospital until like 4 p.m. and then I had to fly out immediately from work, from the hospital, drove right to the airport, flew out, and barely I had delays, so I landed at like 9:30. By the time I got to our Airbnb, it was 10:30, and we were testing, and we found out that at Cardfest, as long as you submit your deck list before 8:30, I believe, you can change the deck list. So we were testing all night. We tested from 10:30 when I got to the Airbnb till 2:30 a.m. the night before Nats, and we came up with this deck list, which basically takes out that Animal Searcher event, because we were like, hey, those are 4 bricks that just did not cut it for us. It did not provide us enough justice. If we saw it late game, we thought it was a brick and it wasn't worth playing or leaving the Dawn up. It's hard to leave a Dawn up late game unless you're playing your 8 cost, and at that point you want Red Hawk anyway. We thought Red Hawk was really good against Doflamingo, especially if you get it early, because just swinging, because early on we could leave those Dawn up, especially if you go second or even first, doesn't matter. Like, you could just swing 6 and then leave 2 up. It didn't really matter. Essentially what we found was that Red Hawk early helped us kind of stay alive to our theory, where once we get to 8 and 10 Dawn, we could start dropping big bodies and take over the game against Doflamingo. And that in testing actually worked out. So this change was actually huge for us. And I think this change is why I did so well. As you saw, I played 5 Doflamingo, I only lost to 1. And that one Doflamingo that I did lose to hit that triple Jinbei. He went first, he hit Teach, he set triple Jinbei, got a ton of value, so many bodies on board, and I just couldn't keep up. Even though I did, I actually drew, fairly average for that game. So, that said, what actually happened? As you might have seen from the matchups, I saw 0 Purple Luffy on my Nationals day. 0. And so my deck that was very teched for Purple Luffy wasn't able to shine. I also saw 0 Blackbeard. So my deck that was teched for Blackbeard didn't get a chance to shine. What I did see was a plethora of Doflamingo, and I expected that, but maybe not 5 rounds of Doflamingo. And the deck worked in the sense where the Dofi matchup was not that bad. I was outplaying a lot of my opponents, but they were all very, very, very close games. Much closer than I ever anticipated. And there was one game where I actually won due to having exact counter. And if my life was anything but a 2K, I probably would have lost that game. So these rounds were not like a cakewalk. These were all very good opponents, very, very well seasoned Doflamingo players, and I was winning either due to surprise factor or due to hitting the right cards at the right time. But one thing I did notice a lot was consistency issues. Sometimes I was only seeing my top end and none of my choppers, and sometimes I was only seeing my choppers and none of my top end. And I feel like the deck suffers a lot from that consistency issues, and that's the next step going forward is how the hell do we fix this consistency issue? Because I think Shanks and OP10 specifically has legs. Why? Blackbeard and Doflamingo are the top two in the meta. The next best in the meta, I think, is Usopp. And I think that's like a 4-life leader, which can be taken advantage of by the Zoo package. Purple Luffy is still in the meta, and the Zoo package still obliterates Purple Luffy. So just like Zoro was obliterating Purple Luffy back in 8.5. So I think we are in a position where Shanks is a real deck. I don't think it's a bad deck, but there's some issues that we need to fix, whether it's consistency, whether it's changing out ratios. Maybe I don't play the Straw Hat Searcher. Maybe I play something else. I don't know what needs to be done, but that's my next project, is try to figuring that out. And if it can't be done, I'll update you guys. Either way, thank you for watching. I thought that, unfortunately, it was me and one other person that went X3 in our team. The rest of our team, I think, went X4 or X5. So they had bad variants. One deck I haven't talked about that we lose to pretty handedly is Lucci. And Lucci, as you saw, Lucci's good against Zoro, and now of course Lucci's good against Shanks or Shanks. But it's not a losing matchup per se. It is a losing matchup, but it's not as bad as like Zoro was, because we have our top end still. And we play for our top end, but the consistency issue kind of comes into play then. What I will say is I didn't see any Lucci, thankfully, and that is probably the worst matchup for our deck. A lot of my friends, ran into the Luccis and got hit. Lucci was kind of like I guess it wasn't an unexpected black sheep, but it was something that picked up in popularity significantly like a week or two before Nats. And our meta call did not, using this deck, did not adjust for the rising Lucci and BY meta. And so those matchups are either losing or even, whereas the matchups that we teched for actually didn't really show up. So that said, thank you for watching. Once again, please leave your questions and comments in the description. In the comment section down below. I'm going to put this deck list in the description if you want to copy it and try it out for yourself on the sim. If you have any suggestions or improvements to the deck, please let me know. But basically the changes that we made are we added another Red Hawk, we added 2 more Sanji, and added a Nami to add consistency to the deck where we could. And some more 2Ks and some more counter where we could, because this was something that we really needed to do to survive against Doflamingo. And I think it was the right move, but there's more to be done. Thank you. Have a good one.